everyone, and welcome back to our Golden 20s podcast. My name is Sadie, and I'm joined by my co-host, Tegan.
Hi.
And today we are going to be talking all about the secret sauce to how to keep friendships alive and well in your 20s. We know it's a very hard thing to do because life gets busy and you have so many priorities that you're juggling in this decade of your life. But we know that friendships are important. And oftentimes when we ask you guys, what do you want to hear on the podcast? A lot of the times this is at least one of, if not the most requested topic. So we're going to dive into it today. But before we get into it, we are going to kick off this episode as we always do with a connection card.
Yes. And this question is there an experience from your childhood that you wish didn't happen?
Oh, that's kind of a deep one.
Yeah, that's really deep. I feel like there's like a general experience, and this is something that I've talked about a lot, where it's like there's just instances of me trying to do the right thing but not really knowing how because I'm a little kid, and then getting in trouble for it. So it's like one Christmas I put little like toys in my brother's stockings, and then they at one point like felt their stockings, felt that there was something in it. This is before Christmas Day. And then we're like, Santa came early, there's stuff in my stockings. And then my parents were like, Tegan, did you put something in their stockings? And I was like, no, Santa did. And then I got in trouble for lying. And I was like, I don't know. It's just like complex because I'm like, I'm trying to do the right thing, but then I'm getting in trouble because I am lying. But it's for doing something nice. And there's like a lot of instances like that. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I wish it was different. I can't imagine like a different way to experience that, but I just wish it was.
Yeah. Interesting answer. I feel like I'm not having a super clear like experience come to mind. Like, I don't know. I feel like I also lied a lot as a kid, but I was like very much an instigator, not necessarily I think my thing is I just wanted to like be friends with my sisters, and like I wanted to do everything with them. I wanted to be them, and they just didn't want me to. So it was like I was never allowed in their room. So I'd go in their room because I wanted to, and then I'd lie about, no, I wasn't in your room. you know? So it was from a different place that you were saying, but I feel like even that, it's like that's not an experience. Like, I wasn't close with my sisters growing up, and that sucked at the time of growing up. I remember so desperately wanting a best friend who's just like me and like could understand everything I was going through. And I wished that was my sisters, and it wasn't. However, now into adulthood, I do have that with my sisters, and we are very, very close. So I'm like, I don't know, like it was tough as a kid, but it all worked out in the end. And now I'm very lucky and fortunate. So I don't know. That's a bad answer, but that's the only thing I could kind of think of.
Yeah, that's fair. At least you didn't say like, I wish I didn't go to the same kindergarten class as you, or something like that.
No. Yeah, growing up with Tegan really sucked.
Torture.
No, actually, I can think of maybe, what was the question again? Just like, what was an experience from your childhood?
Yeah, that you wish you didn't experience? Didn't happen.
Okay, like that's, I don't have anything I wish didn't happen, which I'm very fortunate to say that. I do also think like there were many times throughout my childhood that I always tried to make friends with the popular kids. And I don't know why I did that. And I think like Tag, like me and you were like off and on friends because I would always like be friends with like our core group of friends. But then something would wash over me where I was like, no, I'm going to go befriend these other people because I don't know why. Just they seemed cool and popular, and I wanted that. Where it was like, where are those people now? I have no idea. I haven't talked to them since I last tried to befriend them, whenever that was. Yeah. Like they weren't real friends, you know what I mean? But for some reason I was always drawn to that every now and again. So maybe that's an experience that wasn't worth it. Probably shouldn't have happened. I should have just stuck with the people I knew were my real friends. But again, at the end of the day, it all worked out where you guys were always like, yeah, we're still friends. Yeah, it's not a big deal. You know, like,
Yeah.
I didn't lose any friends in the process, which I'm very fortunate for. But I don't know.
Yeah.
That's maybe another answer that's maybe more relatable. I don't know.
Yeah, and related to this episode too. What's
Yeah,
funny
true.
is I just talked about this because I was at a Christmas party and the people hosting had a game that was called like the Hyuga game or Haiji game, however you pronounce
Okay.
it, which I had never played, but it literally was just like connection cards. And
Okay.
so they would just like, everyone would pull a card and we'd go around and answer. And one of the questions was, I can't remember if it was like, have you had a lifelong friend? Or I think it might have been like, have you had an enemy that's turned into a best friend? And then we all went around the circle and people were like, I can't even think of a person who I would call like my enemy. Like that's weird phrasing. And
Yeah.
then, you know, people were talking about how they had lifelong friends and stuff. And someone had brought up like, oh, Tegan, didn't you meet Sadie in kindergarten? And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, she was never my enemy, but there were definitely
Yeah.
times like we weren't friends and now we are friends. And then the whole group was just fascinated. They're like, well, why weren't you friends? And I literally said she wanted to be friends with the popular people because that's what was important to her. They were like, oh my God, this is crazy. So it's just so funny. That was like not that many weeks ago. And then you're saying the same thing. Cause then I was like, did I imagine that? Like, or
No.
I was like, was it one day that it now in my mind it happened over years? But yeah.
No,
funny.
it happened, and it happened like multiple times. Like we went to 3 different schools. So we went to one school from kindergarten to grade 6. I can think very vividly of that happening there. Grade
Yeah.
7, grade 8, we went to like a different middle school. I can remember it happening there, and I can remember it happening in high school too. So it's like it definitely wasn't just a one-time thing.
Okay, good.
And I
couldn't
guess
tell
I
if I
never
made that up.
no, and I guess I never learned my lesson. And if you guys are like, then why did you guys still stay friends? Like the weird thing is we walked to school together every single day through
Yeah.
all of those years because Tegan
Yes.
lived in like the neighborhood right behind me. Like logistically, like we just walked to school together
to be
all yeah,
friends.
every day. So it
Yeah.
was like we started and ended every day together, even if we didn't hang out at recess or like
Yeah.
play together after school, you know. But yeah, there were times, and like probably more often than not, I would say, where we were like hanging out at school and stuff too. But that wasn't always the case, and I don't know why. I just wanted to befriend the popular kids, and also like we're thinking back on it, were they even popular? Like,
I don't know. I can't even picture who you're talking about in high school. Like I remember in elementary school, I do
Yeah.
think they were the popular kids, but past that point, I'm like, I have no idea. The other
we're
thing
talking
that's
about-
funny is at this
Yeah.
party, they asked how we stayed friends. And I said, because we walked to school together every day. So our story, this is so good. If we were quizzed, we'd have the exact same answer. But I do
That's
also
so
think
funny.
like you had sister energy where I
Right.
didn't know how like to even talk to people like that, where sometimes I was like, I can't tell like if you're being mean or if it's just like this is how girls talk to each other, because I had brothers where it's just like a very different way of interacting where it's almost less sneaky, like it's more upfront mean, where I think
Right.
if you're not used to it, it seems meaner, but then sometimes like girl energy is like more sneaky, and I was just like, I don't even know like what's going on, what's happening. So I don't know, there was definitely some of that. And then I think me being the oldest and just being like, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, and you were
Mhm.
like the youngest, like, yeah, I run this
Trying to-
shit, my sisters
Yeah,
have been
but-
here.
like I run this shit, but also like I was just so desperate to like find my people and fit in
Mhm.
because like I was saying, I didn't have that with my sisters. So then
Yeah.
I guess I was just like chasing that at school too. This is actually a
Yeah.
very healing question in the sense of
Okay.
like, this is a very interesting reflection I've never done before. And I'm glad we're talking
Mhm.
about this because I feel like I owe you an apology. Like, thanks for
I have no
sticking
bad
with me
feelings about
through
it.
all of it.
It's
Oh
just
my
funny.
God. It is funny. And
Yeah.
Tegan didn't even tell me that she was literally talking about this a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
with
no.
people.
I
So I'm
forgot.
like, oh my God, what friend group is this? These people are probably like, what the hell, Sadie?
Yeah. That's so funny. It was Taylor and Adelaide. So
Okay,
the
yeah.
next time you see them, you can be like, hey, so you heard like my whole backstory. There were ups and downs, but
Ups and
I don't
downs.
remember it in middle school or high school, though, to be honest. I just remember
Yeah.
like moments in elementary school.
Yeah, and I don't think I was actually chasing the popular kids in middle school and high school. It was more just like trying out different friend groups. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. But in any case, maybe that game, because I feel we're nearing the end of our Happy Tears deck. Maybe we get a
Yeah.
new deck and it's the Hugo game.
Yeah, that would be fun. It had some good questions, like, and just like funny answers from people in the group. Like, one of them was like, have you ever been caught red-handed? And people were just like telling stories of them stealing things as little kids, and it was just so funny, like all in this group drinking. And then one person was saying like that he had stolen something in the self-checkout at the grocery, and he was like torn apart by guilt. And half of the group was like, oh, I do that every time I grocery shop. Like, it was just so funny. So that's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's so wholesome. I love it.
Yeah. Anyways, here we are like 10 minutes later after going on this big rant. But it is all on theme because we're talking about friendships and how to maintain them. Like Sadie said, every time we put out like a Q&A of what would you like to hear about, how to make friends, how to keep friends, all that stuff comes up time and time again. It's so hard when you're in your 20s. Even people in my life are sometimes asking me for advice on how to make friends. And so we do have a couple episodes on that, but this one's going to be more specific to kind of maintaining friendships. How do you keep the friendships alive? Because it is easier, like we were saying, if you're walking to school together or you're living in the same dorm or you're going to the same classes, it's easier to maintain friendships. And then when you're out just living your own life, you're like, how do I do this anymore? So we're going to dive into that. It's also been like kind of a trending topic, at least on TikTok, because there's been a lot of discourse around like social contracts and how there's a lot of like flakiness in today's culture where people are like, I don't know how to maintain friendships, but then they'll flake on like 90% of their friendship activities. And there's a lot of like, I've got to put me first. I've got to be selfish, which like totally true. You do have to do that. But then you're also probably giving up parts of those friendships as well. So it's just very top of mind for lots of people. There's a lot of like loneliness going on. So yeah. And there's also this article that's been going viral. Like I've seen it mentioned so many times. And it's an older article called Always Go to the Funeral. And it's actually from 2005. And it's by the writer Deirdre Sullivan. And it was a part of NPR. And the whole idea of the article is she's like, you should always go to the funeral because it means so much to the family. So one of the quotes from it is, always go to the funeral means that I have to do the right thing when I really, really don't feel like it. I have to remind myself of it when I could make some small gesture, but I don't really have to, and I definitely don't want to. I'm talking about those things that represent only inconvenience to me, but the world to the other guy. You know, the painfully underattended birthday party, the hospital visit during happy hour, the Shiva call for one of my ex's uncles. In my humdrum life, the daily battle hasn't been good versus evil. It's hardly so epic. Most days, my real battle is doing good versus doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's very accurate, especially in your 20s.
100%. I think that last line especially resonates with me so much. And I think it applies to so many areas of life, like showing up for yourself. It's not a matter of doing it well or perfectly or doing it at all. It's a matter of, that's just it. Doing it even a little bit or not doing it at all. And I think about this is less so about like friendships, but something that came to mind for me in reading that, and especially that line, was the example of how I always want to call my grandparents more. Like always. Every time I talk to them on the phone, I'm like, that was so nice. I know how much it meant to them that I called. Like, I need to do this more often, but then I don't. So it's not the matter of like choosing to do it and like how well to do it. It's just the fact that I don't show up at all. So I don't know. I feel like you can apply that to friendships. I was also thinking when you were talking about how lonely it is and like, or how lonely people are feeling these days, I do feel like social media has something to do with that. And I also feel like social media has a bit to blame for not reaching out to your friends or like not calling people, not texting them, not checking in, because you're always seeing what people are up to based on like what they're posting on their Instagram story. And like you feel like you feel like you're keeping up with them, you feel like you're keeping in touch. But like as we all know, social media is not real life, and those interactions that you have viewing somebody's story are very, very different than the interaction you would have if you text this friend, made dinner plans, and caught up with them one-on-one. So I do feel like there's also a bit of that at play here as well.
Yeah. I also think a trap that people can sort of fall into is thinking that like the grand gestures matter more than the small stuff. So it's like, well, I got them the most expensive birthday gift, so I must be their best friend. When like obviously no. But I see people fall into this trap all the time where it's like, well, I showed up to their birthday present, I showed up to their wedding, so obviously I'm a really good friend of theirs. But it's actually, I find that friendships are maintained by doing the hard stuff that you don't want to do over like you went to a wedding where they paid $500 for you to have a meal and dance to a band. Like, wow, what a sacrifice you've made. Versus like I cat sat for Sadie, where it's like, did I want to like drive to Sadie's house by myself? No. Why would I want to do that? But I did that because that's what friends do. And then I got to force her cat to look at me, which was a plus. But it's like that's better for building a friendship than me buying Sadie a fancy Christmas gift. At least I think so. I hope you agree, Sadie.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the other thing too, is in order to have good friends, you need to be a good friend. And we've definitely said that in previous friendship episodes as well. But it's like, you also can't just expect these grand gestures from people, or even the small things. Like you can't expect people to show up for you if it's big or small, if you're not showing up for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel comfortable asking Tegan to cat sit my cat because I know if she were to ask me that, I would do it in a heartbeat. Like I think it is a lot of give or take. And interestingly enough, I feel like this is also a thing I'm seeing a lot of on TikTok. And it's kind of along the same vein anyway, where people are also applying that to their partner in the sense that like the whole, you need to be a good friend, or you need to be a good friend to have a good friend. I'm seeing that in the romantic relationship space as well, where people are writing down, who their dream person is, which is a common manifestation tool, if you will, especially for us single girls. But then they're also writing down, okay, what is the type of partner that this person is looking for? Like that ideal person that they just journaled out. Who do they need in a partner? Who are they looking for? And then they try to embody those traits, because in order to attract that person, you have to be that person. So I feel like the same goes for friendships as well.
Yeah, that's so smart. Actually, I've never thought about it that way before. But yeah, as we were saying, friendships aren't all like the grand gestures and things like that. So I did like write down some ideas of ways to like small stuff that some of it's like quote unquote hard, some of it's quote unquote easy. But I do feel like these are key parts of maintaining friendships. And the first thing is to go to the funeral, like this article says. And I get like no one wants to go to a funeral. Like my grandma died and I didn't want to go to the funeral. My grandpa didn't want to go to the funeral. We had to be like, Grandpa, get in the car, we're going. But it's like, this is just what you do in our culture. It sucks, but this is what we do. And even I went to a funeral of a friend from high school. Her father had passed away, and I literally had not seen her since high school, but I spent a lot of time at her house in high school. I had known her dad very well. He was like the coach of my hockey team and stuff. And so even though I literally hadn't seen him or her in like 10 years, I was like, I do feel like I should go to the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the funerals are during the week, so I had to take a day off work. It was in my hometown. I had to drive 2 hours. Like, none of it was easy. The easy thing would have been to do nothing. But for some reason, I was like, I'm going to do it. And then I was like the only person at this funeral who was the age of the kids. No one else showed up. No one else that were like friends of any of the other kids, like her siblings, nothing. It was just me. And they were so happy to see me, like all of them, all of her siblings, because they were just like, oh, thank God, someone normal to talk to.
Right.
Like, it sucks when you're just standing in a line and it's like friends of your dad that you don't know, or like old people who went to church with you. And yeah, it's nice they showed up and they tell great stories and you get to hear about, you know, your dad or whoever passed away. But it's also nice to just see someone that you're like, oh, I can relax and just like have a moment here. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention, is to always go to the funeral.
Yeah, in literal sense. And it's funny that this is like the whole underlying theme to this episode and like that article, because just over the holidays, actually, my sister was telling me that before the holidays, her best friend's grandma passed away, and my sister went to the funeral. Like you were saying, she just kind of showed up, and it surprised my sister's best friend, and my sister's like, what the heck, like, we're best friends, of course I would be here for you. But her best friend was like, that's just not something I would think to do for somebody. But then it turned out the best friend had a friend who was going to a funeral, and she was like, you know what, I'm gonna show up for this friend because it meant so much to me when my friend showed up for me. So I feel like it's a simple thing, like we're saying. It's probably not something you want to do. You don't personally get anything out of it, but it just means so much to the other person that it's worthwhile doing. And it's like, we both have now like personal experience to be like, yes, this means something to these people. You know what I mean? And then my favorite part of the whole story with my sister is then inspired her friend to be a better friend. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit of a pay it forward. And I think it goes back to that whole idea of like, you need to be what you want to attract, because I think that's how it all starts.
Yes, definitely. I love that. I'm glad that your sister started the positive change.
Right?
Hopefully someone listening to will be like, okay, I'm going to do that. We can just like keep the positive vibes going, because that would be great.
We need that right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think like obviously funerals, you can't really control when those are happening or what the deal is. It's like when they pop up, you should do it. But I think something you can control is just reaching out to your friends. And this is especially like if the choice is doing something or doing nothing, it's so easy to do nothing. But like, just reach out to your friends, send a text, send a DM, be like, hey, want to have a phone call? Whatever it is. Like, my husband loves being like, hey, do you want to play video games? And then he just like has live chats when he plays video games, all that kind of stuff. And it can literally be as simple as a text that takes like 10 seconds to send.
Yeah. And I think this goes back to my grandparent example, where it's like my grandparents always, whenever I call, they're always like, oh, we were thinking about you, or oh, we wanted to call you, but they never will do it first, because they're under the impression I live this super busy life. They don't want to bother me. You know what I mean? So they'll never call me. So I know I have to call them. But I also have friends like this, like friends who have literally said they will not be the friend to reach out first. And that's kind of a weird thing. Teg's like, what the heck?
I don't like
that. But I don't like that either. But for me, I need to decide, because I feel like this is actually kind of a common thing. People just aren't as like upfront about it, and like, or they don't even realize it about themselves. And maybe you're one of those people where you're sitting at home being like, why has nobody texted me? But then if you go and look at your phone right now, be like, oh, maybe it's because I haven't texted them either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But in any case, with some of these friends, some of them I've decided not worth it. Like, I'm not going to reach out to them first. So if that friendship dies, I don't care. Like, not that much lost. However, I have one friend in particular where I'm like, I know she'll never reach out to me first. Every time I reach out to her, she's always so happy to hear from me and like has so much to say. Like, she just was like essentially waiting for me to reach out. And why I am like, okay, this is a friendship I'm not wanting to like let go of. I just need to accept that it's not personal. Just it's something they have in their head that they can't reach out first. my like in-person interactions with this person are so great, where I'm like, once we do text and we set up time to hang out, like that value I get from the friendship trumps, you know, the whole fact that I had to reach out to them first. So I don't know. I feel like, all this being said, yes, be the person to reach out, because chances are that person wants to hear from you. If it's your grandparents, if it's this friend, if it's, you know, a childhood friend you haven't talked to in years, but you keep thinking about them. Maybe you see something on somebody's Instagram, going back to the whole social media and how it plays into this. Like, rather than just liking it, maybe you actually text them and you're like, oh my God, I saw you just got back from a trip to Italy. How was it? You know, like, turn it into a personal thing, because chances are people do want to hear from you. They just don't think to reach out, or they won't reach out first.
Yeah, definitely. I can't even fathom that, because I'm such a like texter, where I will just text anyone for like the silliest reasons. So my brain just like does not work like that. But that's a good point. And I think if you're someone who's like, I want to be texting people, or, you know, I want to be maintaining these friendships and I don't know how to do it, like, stop listening to this episode right now and send a text.
Yeah,
because it
pause.
is that simple.
Yeah, that's a thing. And the other thing, sorry, just I also want to say, you don't necessarily need to text to make plans. Like, it's okay just to be like, hey, how's it going? I've been thinking about you, haven't heard from you for a while. And if they don't reply for 2 days, that's fine. But they will reply to you eventually when they have a moment to. And then maybe you still take, you know, a day or two to reply because you get busy. Like, it doesn't need to be, I'm going to drop everything to hop on this 2-hour FaceTime with this person, or now we need to coordinate like going for dinner and drinks. Like, no, you can catch up with people and show you care and show up for them just by sending them a simple, hey, just checking in, how's it going, text.
Yeah, 100%. I think the next thing I had on my list was, I was still thinking down like the rabbit hole of going to the funeral, but it's like, if your friend's going through a hard time, or even if they're having some sort of success, it's nice to be like sending a card, sending flowers, sending something like that. Like, if the funeral is happening and it's a plane ride away and you can't afford it, don't be like, oh God, well, there goes the friendship. But it's like, you can send flowers. You can send them a text to say you're sorry to hear about it. You can leave a message like on the funeral page, send a card, like little things like that. And the same if they're having something successful happening, or they're having a birthday or things like that. Like, these little moments, little gifts can go a long way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think of like a few years ago, a personal example of this for me that meant so much to me was, a few years ago, my family had to put down our family dog, and my coworkers knew that this was happening, but that's not something you really like take time off work for. I was working from home anyway, so I could hide kind of how sad I was. But my coworkers knew that this was going on, and they sent me Craig's cookies, and it was like half a dozen cookies, and it was just like, this is to cheer you up, to let you know we're thinking of you. And it was so simple. It was just so unexpected, though, that I didn't think they would do that. I didn't think anything of it. And then this cookie show up at my door, and I was just like, that is so nice. Like, my love language is gift giving. So I was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to like get something. And, you know, that does make me feel better. But in any case, just being like, yeah, we got you. Like, we want you to have this to like cheer yourself up. Like, that's so nice. But I also think it can be simple things too. Again, going back to the whole text notion. Like, I think you're talking about positive things too, Tag. Like, I'm a big fan of, if I know somebody has a job interview or a really big presentation or something, like my friends were telling me about it, I'm going to text them good luck the day that situation is happening. And same, even following up, being like, hey, how did it go? You know, like, I'm invested because I actually care about them, and like, I want to be that good friend for them. It could be the same when they're traveling. Like, it doesn't even need to be this big like life milestone moment of like a funeral, a job interview, anything like that. Even just when they're traveling, like, usually I know when my friends are like leaving the country. So it's like, safe travels, you know? I know you're getting on a plane today. Safe travels. Have a great trip. Be safe. Whatever little message I want to send them. But it's just like, I'm thinking of you. I know you're going through something that's important to you, and I want you to know, yeah, I'm cheering you on, or I got your back.
Yeah. I love that. Sort of related, I keep notes of people's like anniversaries, birthdays, and stuff in their contact card or whatever it's called in my phone. And yeah, it's like so simple, but it's like when I see on Facebook it's someone's birthday or someone posts an Instagram story being like, happy birthday, so and so, like take a note of it. And then it takes the brain power out. It makes it even less of like a barricade for you to climb over to send that text saying happy birthday or happy anniversary or anything like that. I also think a big thing is when you're in person with someone, first is to be fully present when you're talking to them. Like you've made all this work, you've sent the text, you set up the dates, whatever it is, then put your phone down and actually be there to like be there and to be a listener. I also think another nice thing is to like ask or remember the names of the people in the stories that your friends tell. So if they're talking about the same coworkers, like keep track of who the coworkers are. It's not that hard. Or, you know, who they're dating, that person's name, whatever it is, because it shows that you're interested, you're invested in their relationships. And it also just makes it easier to communicate. Like it's a lot easier to be like, and then Tyrell did this and Tyrell did this, instead of being like, and then my boyfriend or my husband or whatever. So yeah, again, like it's simple, but I still feel like it's worth saying.
Yeah. I feel like I have two other things to add to that, like being present. And the first is actually kind of maybe related, maybe not, but I feel like I have really deep relationships with my friends, and people ask me like how, like why, how did this coworker who you just asked like, hey, how was your weekend? How did they go from that to being like a really good friend where I know like intimate details about their life kind of thing. And I think it's kind of the same logic you need to apply to dating as you do to friendships, where it's like in order to have people like open up and be vulnerable and like actually form a deep relationship with them, again, you need to do that with them as well. So it's like you need to share information about yourself, and like, yeah, you need to tell like personal stories and like talk about those coworkers, talk about whatever you went through with your husband or your boyfriend, like, and then over time they're also going to share that with you, and like that's just going to add another layer to your friendship. So I think that's the first thing I wanted to mention. And the second, and this is something I'm extremely aware of, is pay attention to how much you're talking about yourself. Because it's very easy to get caught up in your own bubble. I know that. You have so much happening in your life, especially the older you get. Like we were saying, there's so much to balance and so much going on that when you are with your friends, it's probably you just want to like dump everything on them, be like, oh my God, life is so crazy. It's so chaotic. You can't even imagine what I'm going through. But chances are they're going through their own shit too, and they need to dump just as much on you as you're dumping on them. And that's what being a good friend is like you're saying, being there through good and bad, but like equally being there for each other as well. So I feel like that's something too where like for me, I'm asking follow-up questions rather than just waiting for that person to be done talking, to be like, okay, great. Now that you're done talking about your day, I'm going to tell you about mine. Like, it's like, no, that's not... We're not just hitting a ping pong back and forth. Like, I want to know everything about your day. I'm going to ask you all the follow-up questions, and then we can move on to me, you know? So I think that's a good gut check too, and just something to pay attention to. Because for me, I find I often, when somebody's telling me, you know, I'm going through this thing at work or anything like that, my first instinct is to be like, oh, well, one time this happened to me. It was similar. But the next thing you know, we're talking about me. And I know I've been on the opposite side of that, and I know how frustrating and like awful that feels, where it's like, wait, I was just looking to you for advice, but now we're talking about your work problem from 5 years ago. Like, how did this happen? So I think if that's your instinct, just try to catch yourself and like redirect, you know, the conversation to keep it focused on your friend.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's also like just being an active listener. And this is something like, I don't know, I think it's working from home has like rotted my brain or something, but I've become such an interrupter, and it is my biggest pet peeve in myself, where I'm like, girl, shut the fuck up. But I think it's because 90% of my interactions with people are on like Zoom calls. Right. So there's always like a weird delay, and it's like people can't see when you need to talk, or whatever. And so it's like you just have to start talking and then people will listen. But now I'm doing it in real life, so I have like tried to fix that. But it's like you have to be asking questions because you are interested and you're listening. Like you're not asking questions because you're like, okay, this is what I should do. You know what I mean? I know there's so many books out there that are like, here's how to manipulate people and blah blah blah, and it's like use their name when you're talking. We're not doing that. We're actually trying to talk.
Yeah, and I think it's just, if you want people to care about you, if you want people to ask you those questions and genuinely care, again, you just need to be you need to be aware of what you're doing and how you're showing up in your friendships in order to get that reciprocated back to you.
Yes, exactly. This actually leads into another point that I wanted to bring up, which is that you should be like supporting your friends' goals, your friends' dreams, even if that makes you like jealous, if that makes you uncomfortable, or if their like goals are different than you. Because I've lost friendships because people were like not supportive of what I was doing, what my husband was doing, what we're trying to do. Like people are weird about that kind of stuff. And like it sucks. Obviously, like I have lots of friends who make more money than me, and it always is like a little pang of like sadness, jealousy, whatever it is. But then it's like I don't take it out on my friends then. Like if my friend gets a high paying job, I'm not then like gonna ghost them or just be like not interested. It's like, yeah, good job. I'm your friend. I'm gonna support you. You know what I mean? But lots of people do not do this. And it's the same where, like, if you don't want to have kids, but it's your friend's dream to have kids, like, you should be supporting them through that dream. You should be excited for them if they get pregnant. You should be, like, helping with the baby shower, stuff like that. Even if you're like, I think kids are disgusting. I think it's morally wrong to have kids, whatever it is. Like, that's also, I think, a key part of maintaining a friendship.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like this, again, becomes so prevalent post-grad when people are taking on different phases of life at different times. And everybody feels like they are supposed to be on the same timeline, but they're not. And the same experiences should be happening to them at the same time, but it's not. Like, yeah, it just becomes this very like jealous and malicious time where it really shouldn't be. And again, if you treat other people that way, other people are going to treat you this way. I know I'm being a broken record, but I just really want you guys to pay attention to that because again, for me, like I feel like, again, I'm very invested in my friends' lives. Like I try to cheer them on. I'm very much like that girl's girl sister energy, but in a positive way too, where I'm like, you go girl, like, you know, like I'm always supporting my friends, but that's why I have such supportive friends in my life too. So definitely a good check-in with yourself. But I think that's extremely important because chances are if you're mad at your friend for making more money than you or having a house when you don't, being in a relationship when you're not, having kids when you don't have them yet, chances are that's an internal insecurity that you're projecting onto your friend, and it's not your friend's fault. Yeah. You're now the cause for that friendship falling apart, which it inevitably will.
Yeah.
This is tough love.
Yeah. It's getting
the problem
serious
is
now.
you, whoever you are listening to this. Problem is you.
Yeah. Well, I have one more tough love point out of my whole big ranty list, but my last point is to stop flaking. Like, just, you know, stop flaking, which I get it. I've had moments where people are like, hey, I don't think I want to go out. And then I've had the relief of like, yes, I get to stay home. Like every once in a while, it is a good moment. But it's like, if it's every time, people are just going to stop inviting you to things. Like it's not nice. So don't do it. And then especially if you constantly cancel and flake, don't be then questioning why you don't get invited to things or why you don't have friends. Because that's probably why.
Yeah, 100%. I'll maybe end this episode on a positive note or a little bit more of a like, I don't know, I guess more positive thing. But again, just another last small gesture to do. I love texting a friend after we hung out. It's often like, text me when you get home. You know, like that's often how I leave my catch up with friends. So when I do get home or when they get home, typically whoever gets home first texts each other, hey, made it home. I always love to add, like, I had such a great time. Like, you know, it's kind of like that dating texting, like I was talking about, where there's like parallels between friendships and like romantic dating relationships. But I love that. I live for that. Like, same with if you went to someone's party and they text you the next day being like, hey, thanks so much for coming to my party last night. Like, hope you had fun, whatever it is. Like, that just means so much to me, where it's like, not only did we make an effort to hang out, then we actually did it and we hung out, we caught up. Now it's like, sitting here thinking about it, it's like, oh yeah, that was a really great time, and like I'm so glad you feel that way too. Like, I don't know, it just warms my heart so much. So maybe this is something small you can work into like your friendships, because I feel like it goes a really long way.
Yeah, I love that. That is a good note to end on. Some positivity, because it's all good. Hopefully we like shared some actionable items that are inspiring, and not just you like spiraling at home being like, oh god.
Yeah, like, hopefully we built you up after we knocked you down.
Exactly. So good. Okay, well, yeah, I guess that's where we'll leave it this week. If you like this episode, make sure you first give us a rating, because that really, really helps our podcast. And then make sure you're following or subscribed to us so that you see when new episodes drop. They come out every single Tuesday. So prepare yourself for that. If you don't have any friends, we can be your virtual friends every Tuesday. And you can also follow us on social media at our Golden 20s on almost all the platforms. And we post there throughout the week, not just on Tuesdays. And we also have a Patreon page, which is the best way to show your support for the podcast for as little as $2 a month. That's everything this week. So thanks for listening.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye.